new way of thinking that you have to do in everything you do. And the thing is that social media can bring everything into the unique person's living room today. That creates a totally different pressure on companies to actually realize and actually go through their value chains and see where do we supply things from. I don't know if you saw the news yesterday that the Swedish or the Stockholm healthcare Landstinget, the one who runs the hospitals and government hospitals, they just stopped buying. They just went out and said, we're not having Dell computers anymore. Because some media, somehow organizers ran around in China and showed that there was bad labor in the factories of Dell. And suddenly they just go, boom, we're changing everything because we can't buy computers from a company who doesn't actually respect human rights. That's how fast. Dell just lost a major client. Technology changes everything. Suddenly Dell has to know what they're doing. You have Göran Persson today in the news. Did you see that? He had, it was in media that he had done some renovations on his summer house without having a company doing it. We didn't have a collective bargaining agreement, kollektivavtal. Bad luck everywhere right now. Not good for his PR because he stands up for the rights of the workers. That's how fast it goes. Back in the days, it was in printed media. You had an entire day to kill that. Because before the newspaper went into print, and then it was printed, and then people have to buy it and then read it. God, that was so much time. When I started at Vattenfall, when I started with this crisis management unit, I remember one of the first incidents was just a few days after I started. And suddenly I see on Aftonbladet, which is one of the largest tabloids, that there's a fire in the nuclear power plant. And that was 10 minutes after we had received the call from the nuclear power plant saying, hey, we have a smoke alarm set off because we're doing some tar work, Shara, on one of the rooftops outside of the reactor building. But there was some smoke and the detectors went on, and when the detectors come on, the fire brigade comes, and when the fire brigade comes, the comm radio calls that out to the public, and then there's someone looking into that, and they alert the news media. 10 minutes, guys, 10 minutes to kill that one. That was my first experience of how fast it goes, until it was all over Swedish media. Fire at the nuclear power plant, fire. And then we killed that one, until we realized that, oh my God, it's in German newspapers now. And that was my afternoon. That's how I learned how fast it goes. So how can you deal with it? You have to be proactive. You have to start communicating before something happens. And that takes bravery from management. It takes bravery to put things out there on your internet or actually communicate things beforehand. But this is what you have to start doing. And this is a chain, and this is hard for many leaders. Because they're like, what are we doing? If you put it out there, we might get attention to something we really don't want attention on right now. So how do we deal with that? I have a good example of a company, Tele2, which is one of the largest operators in telecommunication in Sweden. And they, in the context of the Telia case, those of you who are not from Sweden, we had a big scandal with one of the largest telecommunication companies for the past year and a half, where they did some business in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, and they did business with some, in a not good way, in a corrupt kind of dodgy way, and that blew up in media, and it's been a huge case from their side. So when Tele2 were entered in Kazakhstan, they're like, okay, what are we going to do? We don't want that on us. And you do business. You don't really know. You're entering a new market. There's always a bit of risk when you enter that. So what they did is that they put out a white paper on their homepage, revealing, this is why we go into this country. This is who we're doing business with. This is the due diligence. This is the research we've done before. This is what we found in that due diligence. We found this person that might have some connections to politicians. This is what we did about that. This is how we manage and assess that risk. 4 pages, I think it was. Putting it out there on their homepage. So they're kind of killing the story if they find something. Because if something happens, at least they say, okay, we can have a discussion here because this is what we thought we did, and this is our transparency. We're trying to show that we did good. We had good intentions. And this is a totally new way of communicating your risks to the public, because this is what we're fighting for. This is that. And it's hard. And I actually want you to remember, and that's why I'm saying to everybody, please check your resources. I spoke to a media professor a year ago, and he was so devastated because his students handed in papers where they referenced to bloggers as objective news. And he's like, where are we going if they don't realize that bloggers are not always very objective? When they realize that some of them are paid for it, some of them are lobbying, but you don't check your sources. So please be aware of that when you look into that, because I think that that's on us as consumers to actually start looking into the sources and what we do and what we learn. And we need to interpret the world. It's not interpreted for us. So this is really one of the largest challenges as we have. So, risks. So how do you deal with it? I say all these things, it's so hard and it's so much new, and how do you deal with it then? What's happening? Well, the first thing that you have to realize that risks there's very different kind of risks. I'm going to present 4 different types. So for strategic risks, this is if you, I don't know how many of you came straight from school, or some of you probably worked for a few years or more. But if you've been on a corporate level working, you always heard about the strategic risks. This is a lot of management consultant talking. And these risks usually occur if the market changes or when you have general debate that forces an extensive change in the company's business idea. Anyone who can come up with a strategic risk that's happened, any company? Where they kind of something happens with the market or something happens in the public that they have to change their entire way they do business. I don't have my phone on me, but yeah. Sorry? Oh, you're going to energy now, my favorite. He was saying the coal. Mm-hmm. Vattenfall, for example. Yeah, that's definitely that's definitely an issue. You have a public demand for more green energy and you need to change. However, when it comes to energy, you have these huge cycles. You can't just let's shut it down and build something new. That takes time, but that's definitely one thing, right? There's a pressure from the public. There's a pressure from industry to change, but it's a tricky one. Definitely, that's a good example. Another was I was just saying in my phone. When I was in school, remember, Matti, we had these small phones with a green display, and we could text, and we were really happy that we could play with worm and text, and that was awesome. Everybody had mobile phones when we started. Then suddenly it goes, the other way. Totally different change. We go from a mobile to a computer. Some players did not manage to change. New players came in. That's an example. Some people fell off, and we're probably going to see that in the future too, that these technologies changing, it goes very fast. And some players, they have the strategic effort to actually know where we're going, and they take the risk, and they put money into developing some kind of technology, and they will follow. Others don't have that resources, or they put their efforts in the wrong basket, and they're going to fall out. Financial risk, and I think this is what most people think about, at least when they talk about risk, financial risk. You calculate on your, for example, your exchange currencies. When you actually write your contracts, and if you have a long-term contract, for example, with a client, you need to know what currency you're actually doing your business in, because you need to know the changes that might come, and you might make money on that because you choose the right currency, or you might lose money, for example. That's a financial risk. But really, if you look at 2008, what happened? There were so many companies that just went bankrupt. They had not couldn't manage their risks in a good way. Relational risk, we've been into this a bit. Often described as communication risks, when negative or publicity can generate debate and opinion, which negatively will affect the company's possibility to act. What does this mean? That means that the power of the public especially with social media today, is so strong that with the right power, you can actually change corporates and the way they can handle things and what they can do. Bananas. Have you seen how many organic bananas there are in the shops today compared to how it was 5 years ago? After all those pressure came, and suddenly most of the bananas everywhere you go are organic today, because we knew how much toxins and things are in there. Changes the way you have to deal with it, right? I can give you an example from I said before when I started Vattenfall, the job as a crisis manager there, I started due to an incident that happened in Vattenfall in 2007 when they had problems with the power plants in Germany. Nothing dangerous. It was not a safety. All safety measures went in. There was a fire on a transformator outside of the reactor building. Smoke came up. Everything went fine. Put the fire out. There was no danger on the reactor. And then they had an incident in another power plant that they own. Once again, nothing dangerous with the safety, all routines in place and so on. But they lost all the trust with the public. They lost all the reputation went down. How could that be? Well, they had an inside-out communication. They said, nothing dangerous. We have this under control. How did the public see the situation when they see smoke coming from a power plant? Were they fine with just hearing, it's okay, we're dealing with this? No. Did Greenpeace think that was a good way of communication? No. Did politicians think it was a good way of communication? Was elections going on and stuff? No. So they had an inside-out way of communication and had not put their risk management into place, realizing how do the public see the risk if this happened? If they would have brought everything together and actually went through and, okay, say if this happened from our perspective, this is not a big issue, but the public might realize this in a different way, and this might affect our brand. And what happened is that they did not communicate in that sense, and they got a huge publicity in media, and the head of nuclear had to leave in Germany, and the head of German operations had to leave at the end after 14 days, because they were not communicating in a way that the public thought was relevant for this kind of incident. And this cost the company the standstill and everything that came with it, and the reputation in Germany is something that they're still fighting after, 2007, so it's almost 8 years. That's a consequence of getting a bad reputation. Especially my experience working from engineering cultures, they have sometimes a hard time dealing with this because it was not an operational failure. How can this communication thing create such a big mess when there was nothing actually wrong in the A to B, B to C, C to D outcome? And as a cognitive scientist, you have a lot of work to do there to explain how people experience risk, how you need to deal with human beings, and how they experience things. But the reputational risks, the relational risk and reputational risk are also hard because how can you put a number on it? How much does it cost? Did that incident cost Vattenfall on their reputation? They can calculate how much a standstill from not producing electricity can cost. But how much is the relational risk costing them? It's hard to put into a number, right? If you can't put into a number, it's hard to talk about it. My way of dealing with it, if I have a risk in our company, if there's a risk and we say, and then it might impact our reputation badly, I just say, okay, up a few notches on that consequence scale, right? Up 2 or 3 notches. That's how much it will cost you. It's not like, okay, we're aware of it, because you have to push that consequence up there. Because I can tell you one thing, if you end up here and really having a bad relation risk, if there's something that can kill the enthusiasm among your employees, can make it hard to go to work, and want people to leave, it's that. Because I'm telling you, it's not fun to jump into a car and have to lie where you work because you don't want to tell them that you work for a certain company, because the only thing you hear during that half-hour transport is how bad you are and how lousy you are and how you're a thief and you don't have any morals to work for that company. And that is hard every day. And if that goes on for years and years, that kills you in the end. Because why should you go to work if that's the but you go to dinner parties and the only thing you hear is to defend your company. And yes, I've been lying a few times about what I do because I don't want to get into those discussions. So this is one element that you need to bring up a lot in risk management, to actually remember to have that in your evaluations. Functional risk, and this is also something especially engineers think about a lot. It's just, these are directly linked to the company's operation, and they can threaten the production, service, administration, and management. It can be safety routine. It can be that you treat your employees in the wrong way or something like that, or production failures. And these are usually a bit easier to calculate because it's time, it's maintenance, it's all these things. But then you realize that, for example, let's take our dear SJ, our railway transport here, our company here in Sweden. They've been having a bit of issues here, right? Lately. When I came here, I was thinking of coming with the morning train, and I realized, no, they're having so much issues. Every other day there's delays from Stockholm because there's always something wrong. So I'd better come the day before because otherwise I might not be here. And what happens if you have too many of these failures? What happens with the relation?